He said, it's your turn. I've been a little anxious about this message. Sometimes it's kind of hard to even get up here and do a sermon knowing that you're a sinner, let alone do a communion service. So I've been anxious all week about this, and I picked a good topic. Can you see that? Let the dead bury the dead. Should be a good message, shouldn't it? If you would, take your Bibles and turn to Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 to 22. This is what our topic's going to be on today. I chose John 6, 47 to 51 just because of it talking about Jesus being the bread of life, and that's why we're here today. But we find here in Matthew 8, 18 to 22, we find Jesus soon after the Sermon on the Mount. He's healed a man of leprosy. A centurion's servant had been healed. Peter's mother-in-law had been healed. Demons had been cast out, and many others had been healed. Now look at Matthew 8, 18 to 22. I guess I ought to get ready too. Whoa. Nice. I think I'm going to need a battery. Here we go. Matthew 8, 18 to 22. And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. Then a certain scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you anywhere you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus knew this man's heart. If you get a chance this afternoon and you've got the commentaries, you might read up on the commentaries of what this was actually talking about. But Jesus knew that this man was sincere. He did want to follow Jesus. But he basically told him that he did not know what he was getting into. He knew that this man's zeal would wear off very quickly after leaving the comforts of his own home. And then verses 21 to 22 says, there we go. Another disciple said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Follow me and let the dead bury the dead. Now this sounds like a reasonable enough request from this young follower, doesn't it? Jesus said, I am sure that Jesus, who cares about each one of us as deeply as he does, and we know that he does because he went to the cross for us. But it sounds funny the way that Christ answered him. He said, Follow me and let the dead bury the dead. What in the world do you think is going on here? Sounds a bit cold, doesn't it? Sounds like something some smart aleck might say, like me. Where's the compassion? Hadn't this man just lost his father? Actually, he hadn't. It is very helpful to understand the customs and traditions of the time. First off, this man would not have been listening to Jesus preach if his father had just passed away. The death of a parent held a lot of responsibility for a son. Burial had to take place very quickly because the body would begin to decompose. Second, the man's father was more than likely a healthy man out working. This was a common saying of the day, when my family responsibility is over, I will be free to do this or that. And I think we do the same thing, don't we? When the kids are older and out of the house, we'll have time to do this or that. Or how about when I retire, I'll have plenty of time for this or that. For those of you that have retired, how's that working out for you? So this man was actually telling Jesus when he had nothing else to do, he would find time to follow him. Are those the kind of disciples Christ is looking for? I'd like to believe that Jesus is looking for disciples who are willing to give up whatever is holding them back and go tell the world that his coming is soon. How many of us want to be Christ's disciples just when it's convenient? If you're waiting for it to become convenient, it's never going to happen. The first man who said he'd follow Jesus was over-enthusiastic. We see that in some of the people who attend our evangelistic seminars. People often come to the seminars and they're on fire and excited when they hear the new truths that are shared with them. But later, when it sinks in and they count the cost, it's another story. I remember going to a seminar that we put on out at the fairgrounds with Mike Troxel. And in the front row up on the right-hand side, there were 3 people from the Catholic Church out here on 244. And as they listened and learned, I stand outside. I don't know, I think they were waiting to talk to the pastor after the meeting. And I was standing out there, and they said, "Man, can you believe this? Can you believe that?" And they just kept on and on. And I thought, "Now this is great. We're going to have 3 more converts." But then it never appeared. They never came around. They hit a stumbling block, and oftentimes people do. They want to serve the Lord, but they don't want to give up whatever it is that they've been hanging on to. The second man was overcautious, and many people are that way. His excuse was his family, and family does have its responsibility. There's no getting around that. But his excuse was based on future responsibilities, things that might happen someday. Like saying, "Lord, I'd like to follow you, but 5 or 10 years from now, my dad might die, and I'm going to have to be here." What is your excuse this morning? Comforts of home, family, friends who might not understand you starting to come to church on Sabbath, school, maybe it's work. A lot of people work 12, 14 hours a day. Maybe it's tradition. Maybe your parents and your grandparents attended the Sunday school church right down the road, and that's what you feel you have to do. Or maybe you've had a difference of opinion. Sometimes that happens in a church, and then people tend to fall away. But all these seem pretty selfish when you're standing here at the foot of the cross. It doesn't have to be something big that turns your world upside down and changes everything. I remember several years ago waking up one morning with a terrible pain in my eye. I had no idea why it was hurting, but I just couldn't function. I couldn't drive. I had to have help to get around the house just because of the pain. And then, of course, on top of the pain, you're not paying attention where you're going. And I thought, what in the world's going on? What's wrong? And so I called the optometrist that I was going to here in Shelbyville, and I asked if I could come in right away and he could take a look. And he spent a bit of time looking at my eye through a magnifying glass, and he had a pair of tweezers, and he reached in and said, "There it is." I thought, there it is. And as he held the tweezers up, I could hardly see the little splinter on the end of the tweezers. I had got a metal shaving in my eye and not noticed it until the next morning when I woke up. So sometimes small things can cause big problems. Each of us need to go to Jesus and allow him to remove whatever it is that's holding us back. Christ is the only one who can give you true peace of mind that'll last. In her book, Evangelism, Mrs. White said, "Satan delights in causing small problems. Those intent on waiting for their problems to cease on their own, or those who try to take care of them on their own, are the spiritually dead waiting to bury the dead that Jesus spoke of." Jesus is coming again soon. Do you believe that? Amen. I want to share with you some verses from Hebrews chapter 3, beginning in verse 7. And it says, "Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in rebellion. In the days of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore, I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their hearts. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end. While it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in rebellion." The Lord looks after each one of us, and he knows that we're rebels. It's just a human nature to fight against what the Lord wants you to do. And sometimes it takes a lifetime for people to come around. We've got kids that we sent all the way through school. Well, Matt made it through the 10th grade, and then he started going to Triton. But we sent our kids all the way through Adventist school, hoping that they would be sitting in these pews when we got older. And everybody makes up their own mind. And I believe the kids have good hearts and they'll come around, but in their own time. And that's actually how the Lord works with us, in our own time. He doesn't force anybody to do anything. It's you that gets to make the choice. But it's time for us, especially us who are retired, to stop rebelling and to seek the Lord. In Romans 3:11, it says, "And do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed." At your baptism, you chose to put away everything that was separating you from Jesus. You have that opportunity to do that again today. We're going to go and do the ordinance of humiliation. Adventists celebrate an open communion, so anyone who wants to is welcome to participate. The ladies will gather in the fellowship hall through the door to your left, and the men will gather in one of the classrooms in the back through the door to your right. We're going to go back there and do the foot washing ceremony. We'll be back here in a few minutes for anyone who wants to stay seated in the sanctuary. And when you return, if you notice in the pews, there's cup holders in every other pew. If you would, sit in those pews with the cup holders, and this will allow the deacons to serve you better, okay?